welcome to History Talks. I'm your host Will, and this is Sebastian. In this episode, we conclude our series on the Crusades, and we discuss the Ninth and Final Crusade for the Holy Land. So Sebastian, tell us, how did the Ninth Crusade begin?
Lord Edward Longshanks, Prince of England and heir to the throne of England, he had joined King Louis IX on his crusade for Tunis, or he was set to join anyway. However, before he could arrive, Louis died. The siege of Tunis concluded with a peace treaty, and Edward had men and boats in the Mediterranean, and he decided that he would go for one last venture towards the Principality of Antioch to see if he could save the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which was under attack by Bybars, the Sultan of the Mamluks. Only to find that Antioch itself has fallen to Bybars. His only hope is the Kingdom of Cyprus, which technically the King of Cyprus stylizes himself as King of Jerusalem, though the Jerusalem only holds Acre and some other minor fortifications, as Nazareth has just been taken by Bybars, and he's pressing hard into the kingdom.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. So when this prince comes, he was following up at the end of the Eighth Crusade.
Yes.
He was sailing across the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
And this, in other Crusades, there's been a gap. There's been years, sometimes 10 or 20 years between the Crusades. This Crusade begins immediately after the Eighth Crusade. Is that correct? There's really no... it was Louis, correct? I believe the Ninth, is that correct? Had died, and that was really what ended the Eighth Crusade. But Edward just continued on, and so he became the new leader, and that's really where the delineation is between the Eighth and the Ninth Crusade.
Yes.
Okay.
Hence why the Ninth Crusade is sometimes referred to as Lord Edward's Crusade.
Okay.
So, Prince Edward Longshanks, with Theobald Visconti, who, in 1271, a year into the Ninth Crusade, would be elected Pope Gregory X, they travel to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and Edward decides to revive the plan of contacting the Mongols. He sends an embassy to the Ilkhanate. The Ilkhanate is the Mongol Khanate ruling over Persia. And the current Khan does not very much like Muslims at all. So he's able to convince the Khan of a joint attack. The Khan will raid the Mamluk Sultanate and be able to keep all of the loot from raiding the Mamluk Sultanate, while Prince Edward will push deep into Mamlukian territory. And Edward decides to go with what can only be described as offensive guerrilla, or I would describe it that way, because he would do what some would call military promenades and other would refer to as raids, where he would attack various towns, get the supplies he needs, and before the Mamlukian army could attack, he'd be somewhere else. Oh, okay.
So this was... I don't think the term guerrilla warfare existed at the time, but he was using a tactic that in modern parlance might be considered guerrilla tactics, which was he was raiding. He was coming in, doing quick raids and leaving. And I think the Vikings were known for doing things similar than that, right? Did he have any, maybe he had some association, or maybe that's where he learned about it from, but it sounds like that's what he was doing. And I'm assuming the reason somebody would normally do that is because the opponent outnumbers them.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have a smaller force, but you can use the opponent's larger force, make that into a weakness, where it basically creates a larger, you have a larger surface to attack on. You have a larger enemy to attack on, so you could go in, hit them quickly, and get out. And that's what he was doing in this case.
Yeah.
And was that successful?
Yes. In fact, in many ways, there's this one Roman general, I forget his name, but he actually used similar tactics against Hannibal Barca, and so I'm wondering if that's where he learned it from, actually.
Okay.
But anyways, in fact, one time Edward goes to a castle, this pretty large castle, and he besieges the castle. The Mongols are attacking the Mamluks, so Bybars has to deal with them. And by the time the Mongols are finished with their raid and they decide to go home and share their loot, Edward has finished the siege. He takes the castle, but then he leaves the castle. He leaves no garrison and by the time he's back in Jerusalem, the Bybars is at the castle, empty, deserted, and the valuables inside the castle stolen. So now Bybars is facing a problem. He needs to find some way to actually combat Edward in battle, because he outnumbers Edward by like 10-1, I think. So his plan is to attack Acre, with the nominal capital of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And it seems like Bybars' plan might work, because he starts sieging the castle. There's not enough garrison to fend off the siege, and Edward is still outnumbered. So Bybars expects no attack, except Edward does attack. In fact, he actually attacks so hard that it kind of blindsides Bybars, and he's forced off the siege. So Bybars decides to retreat to another Crusader castle called Tripoli. He starts besieging Tripoli, then he gives up. It's the exact reasons haven't been specified by any written record, but modern history.
Was he losing?
No, it seemed like he could have.
Seemed like he could have won, but there was something else that drew him back. Maybe he had information about another attack he had to defend in his home territory.
Or actually, modern historians think it was more a lack of information on Edward's whereabouts, and modern historians are thinking that maybe Bybars didn't want to commit himself to this siege when he didn't know where Edward was.
I see. Okay.
So Bybars retreats, but then he comes up, and it seems to Bybars that Edward might be preparing an assault on Egypt. So Bybars comes up with a plan that would kill multiple birds with one stone. It would secure the island of Cyprus. It would cut off Crusaders' supply lines, and it would prevent a naval invasion of Egypt. I'm of course talking about an invasion of Cyprus. Right. And Bybars has a pretty smart plan to take Cyprus. He gets like a whole bunch of boats, disguises them as Christian boats, makes them look like they belong to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Okay. Goes to a town a Crusader-built town in Cyprus called Limassol, and launches a surprise attack. Except the attack fails,
And why did it fail? Were they able to detect the deceit? They could see that the ships were not really.
They saw
Crusader ships.
They saw it just in time.
Just in time.
To fend off the naval invasion.
Okay.
So Bybars ends up needing to retreat, and Edward decides, alright, this is the time to attack. So he tries to rally King Hugh III of Cyprus and Jerusalem, except Hugh is having a problem, because his nobles don't like him. After all, pretty much every battle Hugh has won was actually won by his nobles, or at least so the nobles claim.
Oh, I see, okay.
Whether
they want to usurp his power.
Who could actually be credited, the nobles or the king? It's not exactly known who was in the right here.
Right, it depends on who you ask. Huh? It may be an uppity noble who wants to knock off the king, or it may be that the king was incompetent. We don't know.
But either way, Edward is now stuck with the problem of trying to deal with the fact that these people can't get along, and this results in him being unable to make an actual push. Because Edward wants to take Jerusalem,
right,
but he can't without a larger army, because Jerusalem is a large fort that's in the middle of everything.
Okay. So Edward needs Hugh. Hugh has his own internal struggles he's got to deal with, so he can't help Edward.
And then,
so what happens?
So eventually, Edward inherits the kingdom of England. He inherits the throne of England. He becomes King Edward of England.
And this happens while he's off in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Yes.
Okay.
So, because of this...
Does he know this while he's out there?
When he finds out, he finds out eventually, and at this point he's like, alright, I can't do this.
Okay, so once the crown is given to him, he says, as a prince I was going to be a crusader, but now I need to go back to England and rule my country.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he makes a truce with Bybars. 10 years, 10 months, 10 days. They get to both sides get to keep what they took and promises not to attack each other for that period of time.
10 years, 10 months, 10 days.
Yeah.
Is there any significance to the... I mean, I can understand a number like 10 years. Is there any significance to adding 10 months and 10 days to that as well?
I tried to find out, but I could not find any sources saying anything beyond that they did that.
Okay.
So Edward, he leaves some people in charge to make sure that Bybars keeps up his end of the bargain, and then Edward leaves and goes back to England. So in the following years, over the course of this truce, Bybars is putting pressure on Jerusalem without actually attacking them. So like trying to demand tribute, encroaching on borders.
I see. So he follows the letter. He follows the letter of the truce, but not the spirit. In spirit, he's trying to exert any pressure he can that allows him to not break the truce.
Yes.
Okay.
And after the truce is up, Bybars is able to finally destroy the kingdom of Jerusalem.
Oh, okay, so he waits his 10 years, 10 months, 10 days.
Yeah.
On the 11th day, he comes in and destroys it, huh? And that's the end. That's how the Final Crusade ends.
Yes.
That's doesn't really go out with a bang or anything.
Yeah.
More like goes out with a whimper, you know?
Yeah. And while there would be various other holy wars after this that would be referred to internally or externally as crusades, really this was the last proper crusade for Jerusalem, and really after this, the Crusader spirit, the spirit that had brought the kings of Europe together for those first three crusades, had really been completely extinguished by this point. There was no enthusiasm.
And what year was this when this ended?
This ended, let's see, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was destroyed in 1282, I think.
1282, okay.
So...
Okay, so that was and when did the First Crusade begin?
1095.
1095, so 1095 to 1282.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Almost 3 centuries, I think.
Yeah, almost 1282, 1095. Okay, so... I guess close to 200 years.
Yeah.
Close to 200 years. So there was nearly 200 years of crusading.
Yeah.
Ended in a way that was...
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a little disappointing.
Yeah. You know? Gregory X tried to start a 10th Crusade, but his efforts went nowhere.
Okay, by then just morale was, I'm assuming, morale was not there. The kings did not, or the kings or the princes did not want to lead their armies over to the Eastern Mediterranean to fight the wars. Okay, they had their own struggles back on the European continent.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you have any final words you'd like to say about the Crusades? What was your favorite one? Was it the was it the fifth one? The sixth one?
The third one. The third one seems like it was the closest to actually, making a significant impact on the balance of power between the two religions.
Oh, okay. So you think the third was the most successful for the Christians?
Or the first was technically the most successful because it created this kingdom out of nowhere.
I see.
But if any crusade was going to create a major victory for Christianity, it was going to be the third.
Okay.
But then the fourth happened, and it failed to follow up on the damage done by the third crusade.
I see, and they spent the next 100 years or so trying to reclaim ground on that. So the third was really the peak for Christendom.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any final words you'd like to say? Since this is our last episode on the Crusades, do you have any final words you'd like to say about the Crusades overall?
One of the most interesting things that I've noticed when studying just the general movement of Europe after the Crusades is that the Crusades had an interesting effect on the relationship between Catholics and other religions. And any sort of peace between Catholics and Muslims was largely snuffed out by the constant warring over religion.
And how long do you think that went on for? Do you think that's still relevant today? Are there still grievances today? After, I think you said it was 1285, around, or the late 1200s when the Ninth Crusade ended. So here we have 800 or so years later.
Yeah, you still occasionally see people on both sides citing the Crusades in one way or another for religious purposes.
Wow.
And that's not to say it was all bad. In fact, some historians actually say that because a lot of classical texts were in lands conquered by the Crusaders, a lot of historians actually point to the Crusades as helping bring these texts back to Europe and thus helping start the Renaissance.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of texts are these? Scientific or literary?
Like the works of Plato and Aristotle.
Oh, really? Oh, because they were in Constantinople.
Yeah, they were in Constantinople and they were in Baghdad.
Okay. Really? The works of Plato were in Baghdad. That's interesting. So they had been lost in the realm of Christendom. They had been lost in traditional Europe and had been brought over to the Near East. They were in Baghdad or in Constantinople.
Yeah.
So the Crusaders were able to reclaim these.
Yeah.
So the reason I can go and read something like Plato's Republic today in English may have something to do with the fact that the Crusaders were able to reclaim these texts from Baghdad.
Arguably.
Okay.
Or not Baghdad specifically, but
Baghdad or Constantinople. Yeah, but one of the areas that they crusaded to.
Yeah, or generally in the Levant, there were a lot of copies of old texts.
Oh, okay, that belonged to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. That's interesting how they wound up there. Maybe we can discuss that in another episode. But
yeah,
I think that's it for the Crusades. Unless you had any final words you wanted to say about it.
Nah, just really cool coat of arms they all had.
Yeah, I think so. All right, great job, Sebastian. Great job on the whole series on the Crusades. And tune in again. We will have a new topic. We'll have a new series coming up soon. I think we have some ideas we've discussed for that. But we'll have some new series coming up soon. And I hope you all enjoyed the Crusades. Thank you.